Good evening, everybody. Today is May 14th, 2024. This is a special council meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And before we get started, I'd like to call upon Councilmember Bonilla, if he could please do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand if you're able.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam City Clerk, you can please take the roll.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Andrews.
Present.
Councilmember Bonilla Jr.
Present.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Present.
Councilmember Roach. She's on her way. She should be arriving shortly. Councilmember Syrup.
Present.
Councilmember Cermeño. Mayor Salinas.
Present, thank you. Next, I'd like to move on to public comment. This is reserved for anybody who would like to make a public comment that is not related to the item that's on the agenda. We only have one item on the agenda tonight, and but if anyone has anything else to say, you can come up now. Let me see. I don't know if this public comment is a public comment or if it's regarding the item on the agenda, but Suzanne iPhone, do you want to speak on public comment or item number one on the public comment, or item number one?
Hi, I'd like to just make a public comment,
Okay.
not on the item.
Okay, go right ahead. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Luther with Hayward Concerned Citizens, and I'm just calling today to remind everyone that this is National Police Week. And on behalf of Hayward Concerned Citizens, we'd like to thank all of our officers for their dedication and selfless efforts to enforce our laws and protect the citizens and residents of Hayward. They put their lives on the line each and every day to protect and serve. And we want them to know that our members truly appreciate everything they do to safeguard our lives and property. And also tomorrow, Wednesday, is Peace Officers Memorial Day. And we, Hayward Concerned Citizens, honor all the officers who have given their lives in the line of duty. They have made the ultimate sacrifice, and we will never forget. And I hope that each and every one in this chamber honor their memory, and that you also take the time to appreciate what our officers do every day to protect our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I don't see anybody in the audience, nor do I see anyone else online, so I'd like to close public comment, and I'll move on to public hearing. We only have one item on the agenda tonight, public hearing 24-021, public hearing number 1 to receive input from the community on city council districts to be established for district-based elections beginning in 2026. And I believe Interim City Manager Clausen will kick this off.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and community members. We're here this evening. The city has initiated a process to move from at-large to a district-based system of elections beginning in 2026. The process for moving from at-large to district-based elections is provided under the California Voter Rights Act. And this was initiated by Council on April 16th. Beginning this evening, we plan to hold a series of public hearings focused primarily on drawing geographic districts from which candidates would eventually run for seats of the City Council. To assist us, we have engaged a couple of outside consultants. To assist us with outreach, we engaged the firm Trepepi Smith, and to assist us in drawing geographic districts, we've engaged Q2 Data and Research, and they are going to lead us through the process this evening. And I will kick it over to, I believe, Karin is going to start for us. Or is it, or do we have Trepepi Smith?
I think Jen's going to start.
Great.
Good evening. I'm happy to hop right in if that is okay with staff.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Perfect. And allow me to share my screen real quick. All right. Well, good evening, members of City Council. As was mentioned, I am with Tripeppi Smith. My name is Jen Nentwig, a principal with Tripeppi Smith, and we're the public affairs and marketing firm partnering with the city to support outreach and engagement regarding the districting process that the city has initiated. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Before you hear from Ms. Karen McDonald, the demographer who will talk you through the criteria and the process, I am here to share some information with you about the outreach and engagement that is planned as part of this effort. We'll move on to the next slide. As you can see on the outline in this slide, the City of Hayward is committed to conducting outreach and engagement with the community as part of this process. We know that that, of course, is an important element to involve the community. As you'll learn more about on the next slide, the City of Hayward has already launched a dedicated districting website, maphayward.org. Also, to help ensure access to information about the process, the City of Hayward is offering robust translation and interpretation support. Throughout the process, translations and interpretations in Spanish, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and Tagalog will be available upon request. I want to highlight that the outreach and engagement that is planned will be in a variety of different outlets and channels, including digital, print, and direct email and phone contact. Again, we realize with the need to involve all different members of the community, it's important to reach out in a variety of means. So with that, in addition to the website, which is obviously digital, we're working with the City of Hayward to provide social media on a weekly basis for distribution on the city's social media channels. Over the course of the effort, we'll also plan to work with the city to set up boosted posts to better reach those who may not already be following you on social media. We're also working with the city to develop news articles throughout the process to be posted online and to be shared with local media. So far, there has been one article that the city published to its website on May 2nd, announcing and introducing the process. On the print side, we're developing numerous flyers throughout the process, which we're coordinating with the city to have printed and shared both physically and digitally with various community groups across the city. And lastly, on this slide, our team is working in coordination with the city to conduct direct email and phone outreach to community groups and organizations to provide that additional direct touch point and ensure that those community groups who'd like to be involved have access to information and tools for their group members to participate. And to give you a little bit more background on the districting website, here on this slide, you can see a screenshot and learn more about the city's dedicated districting website, maphayward.org. As mentioned, the website went live on May 2nd, following close coordination with the city's demographer and city staff. The website follows Secretary of State guidelines for districting websites, and it features a built-in translation widget that provides website users the ability to have the site content translated into dozens of languages. The site really is a one-stop shop for everything community members need to know about the process, including background information, schedule and event details, participation tools, and more. For those meeting participants tonight interested in getting involved, I'll go ahead and highlight a few important tabs, which I know Karen will also elaborate on a little bit in her presentation. So in the screenshot of the website, you can see at the top the different tabs. And so the schedule tab is an important page to find all the meeting details for each hearing in the process, including agendas, staff reports, flyers, and meeting recordings after the different hearings. The Community of Interest tab provides an easy-to-use set of tools for members of the public to share input on communities of interest, either by submitting written descriptions via an online form or by visually outlining communities of interest using a drawing tool. The following presentation by the city's demographer will get into greater detail regarding communities of interest, what they are, and why they're important in the process. The Draw Map tab provides a user-friendly map drawing tool where community members can submit their own district maps for consideration. The Draft Maps page is where draft district maps will be posted prior to hearings, where draft maps will be under consideration. And finally, the Contact page is a handy resource that community members can use to contact a member of the city's team working on this process. So that is a brief overview, and we would invite anyone to go ahead and check out maphayward.org where they can dig in a little bit more. And then here on this slide, you can see the tools and contact links and information where members of the public are welcome to share their feedback on this process in these various ways, whether through the website tools that I just shared, the phone number listed here, 510-583-4444, or through the email address districting@hayward-ca.gov. So again, that's just an introduction to where we are now, really kicking off the process. We will plan to work through hearings and through city staff to continue to provide updates throughout the process. But this concludes my presentation for this evening. Thank you again for the opportunity. And before turning it over to Ms. Karen McDonald, the demographer, I'll pause here to see if there are any questions you may have on the outreach and engagement on this process. Thank you.
Mr. Clausen, are we going to wait till both presentations are over and then ask questions, or should we?
I think that's best. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Go right ahead. I would get caught up in the moment.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor Salinas, members of the council, city staff, and members of the community. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Karen McDonald. I live pretty much down the street in Oakland, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for welcoming me here in Hayward. So I'm here to give you a little overview of the process, the criteria, the California Voting Rights Act, and actually I should say hello to the translators that are also in the room. Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm here to just give you an overview of what's coming next in this process. We're talking about the California Voting Rights Act. And we abbreviate it, and you'll hear a lot of abbreviations in this process in the following hearings. The CVRA is usually how we refer to it. It is the California Voting Rights Act became law in 2001, and it's been very powerful and just very instrumental in many jurisdictions throughout the state of California. There are a lot of jurisdictions, small and large, that have changed from at-large to by-district elections since then, and most of them have changed more recently. So it was a kind of slow-going the first few years, and in the last 10 or so years, this process has definitely sped up in California. The California Voting Rights Act expands on the Federal Voting Rights Act, so we'll be distinguishing between what we call the CVRA, the California Voting Rights Act, and the FVRA, the Federal Voting Rights Act. It makes it easier for members of a protected class to prove that at-large elections dilute their voting strength. And again, not only are there going to be a lot of abbreviations in this process, there's also a lot of terminology. And if you refer to the website, there's a glossary with a really good cheat sheet for all of these terms. And if there's anything that we're not properly explaining, please let us know and we'll do a better job. Some jurisdictions have decided on their own to transition to by-district elections, and others were prompted by some legal action. It's generally called a demand letter that is sent. And then, the jurisdiction looks at the situation and then decides whether or not they want to go forward. So usually when a demand letter is sent, the jurisdiction changes to by-district elections. So the process is spelled out by law. The California Voting Rights Act has a lot of timelines and very, very strict requirements for hearings and other matters. There's 4 hearings that have to take place. 2 hearings have to be held before creating a draft map, and then draft maps have to be posted for feedback. Once the public has had an opportunity to provide input on the draft maps, at the 3rd and the 4th meeting, the council can adopt the new district boundaries, and the process, of course, that you're entering into with the city of Hayward now is called districting. And that's different from redistricting, which we, of course, all still remember. The state of California has just gone through redistricting in 2022. That's when the assembly districts, the Senate districts, congressional districts, and so forth were redrawn. So you go through redistricting if you already have districts. And of course, Hayward at this point does not have districts. We're creating districts, so that's why it's called a districting. The criteria and laws that are governing the process can be found in the US Constitution, federal law, and the California Elections Code. There's also various mentions in the government code, but these are the three major sources where you can find information. Let's go through criteria for mapping, because really that's what we all want to know. How do we actually construct these districts, and how do we get there? How do you even start? Because right now there's a blank slate, right? So there's 5 basic criteria that are used for drawing districts, and you'll see these criteria no matter where you look at either redistricting or districting, actually. So they are not, unique to California, really. And some of them are, in fact, called traditional redistricting criteria, so they go way back. The first, of course, is equal population. Everybody's heard one person, one vote, so equal population kind of comes out of that whole sphere. Then second is compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act. So again, that is different from the California Voting Rights Act. The third one is contiguity, and I will go through these in more detail. So contiguity is pretty straightforward. It's basically districts have to be in one piece. The fourth is respect for communities of interest and also neighborhoods. And that's, to me, the most interesting criterion in this entire mix, because it gives everybody an opportunity to really weigh in and talk about their communities, talk about their neighborhoods, talk about what's going on the ground. And that's a really great opportunity to just get involved and weigh in and let the council know and let all of us know what's needed and what would work for you. The fifth one is compactness. That is a geographic criterion. It basically just means don't draw districts that look very funky. So if it looks like something that you would see under a microscope in your chemistry class or so, then you may want to think about your district one more time. But we'll go through this in a little bit more detail. Finally, there is the what not to do, and what not to do is do not look at where your incumbents are living. Do not look at candidates or political parties. So that's California's way to try to take politics out of what is really a political process, right? And we've done this on the state level very successfully, and now we're rolling this down to the local level a little bit more. Let's talk about these in a little bit more detail. The first criterion, as I mentioned, is equal population. The US Constitution requires districts to have reasonably equal populations. So in districting or redistricting, we talk about the ideal population for each district, and it's really straightforward to figure out what your ideal population is. You figure out how many districts you're going to draw, you take your total population and divide it by the number of districts, and there you go, voila, here is your ideal population, okay? So in this case, the city of Hayward, the population that we're going to use, the total population is 162,954. We divide by 6, and then we get 27,159 people per district. And I can imagine that there's already somebody listening and is saying, I looked at the census data, and that is not how many people the city of Hayward had in the last census. And that person would be right. There is an adjustment process that is required by law in California that adjusts the total population for all the jurisdictions a little bit by taking people that were incarcerated in facilities under the control of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And it takes those persons, or the data from those persons, and distributes them to their last known residential address. So that essentially changes the total population a tiny little bit. So basically, the data gets allocated to the various jurisdictions throughout the state of California. And what you also see is in areas in California where you have facilities that are under the control of the CDCR, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, they are all of a sudden losing population. So because those persons, or the data from those persons, they were distributed. So The process, of course, did not move people out of those facilities physically. It's really data. And so we call that inmate data reallocation. So that's why the totals for Hayward are a little bit different than what you may see on the website for the census. And it's just a few hundred people off. So how equal is equal? Because we're talking about reasonably equal, right? We're talking about equal population. And there is different standards for different jurisdictions. For congressional districts, you have to be strictly equal. You have to be very equal. So that means if you're looking at the population after redistricting for the congressional districts, you see that they're only differing by like 1 or 2 people. And I could tell you from experience that is not an easy thing to do. And not only is it not an easy thing to do, what it also does is it oftentimes splits up communities because because equal population is your first criterion, and I should have mentioned that, the criteria are ranked, so it's the most important criterion. So if you have to be very, very equal, and you can't deviate from the ideal population a lot, then you have to make some really tough decisions sometimes. But luckily, on these smaller, lower level districts, we have more flexibility. And the rule of thumb is that when you're reasonably equal, you're looking at roughly plus minus 5%. So that's generally what we use, and I should say there's always a little bit of wiggle room here. And I've worked with jurisdictions that, for example, have in their charter, let's say, a requirement that you cannot deviate by more than 1 or 2%. If there's nothing in your charter, then you're generally going by, what other people are doing and what other people have been able to successfully accomplish. So the rule of thumb, again, is generally plus or minus 5%. Criterion 2 is the Federal Voting Rights Act, so the FVRA. So again, this is different from the CVRA, the California Voting Rights Act. And I'm going to walk you through this a little bit. It's a little bit dense. So what it does is the Federal Voting Rights Act, an amazingly powerful act that has really made a lot of changes, of course, historically throughout the United States and given a lot of people an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. It prohibits the denial or abridgment of voting rights on the basis of race or language minority status. And this next bullet just proves that I'm a little bit of a geek, because I like to point out what language minority actually is, because we don't really think about it that way. So language minority in the Federal Voting Rights Act is actually defined as Asian, Native American, Alaskan Native, or Spanish heritage. So those are our language minorities. And then, of course, we have, race is Black, basically. So those are our covered populations. And, any other, minority group that you may be participating and maybe asking for some representation here, I would encourage, or just a special interest group or community group or so. If you don't fall under these, that doesn't mean that you should not be participating or that you don't have a voice in this process. We have criterion for your communities of interest. So, participate and talk about your group as a community of interest and let us know what you need. And that's a really good way to participate. Anyway, so what does the Federal Voting Rights Act do? It prohibits practices that have the purpose or effect of discriminating on the basis of race or language minority status. And again, it applies nationwide. It applies to all jurisdictions that conduct elections. So specifically, the Federal Voting Rights Act in the districting space is really related to what we call the vote dilution. Electoral systems can limit the ability to elect a candidate of choice, something you just heard me say a couple of minutes ago, by a protected class of voters. And again, the protected class are the minority groups that are covered under the Federal Voting Rights Act in various ways. So, for example, An at-large election system can sometimes prevent even a large minority group from electing a candidate of choice when the majority votes against them. And another example is that a single-member district, which is what we're constructing here, can be drawn in ways that minimize voters' ability to elect a candidate of choice. And systems that limit the ability to elect in this way are said to dilute minority voting strength. So here are two terms that are oftentimes misused, and they are cracking and packing. And if you've participated in the redistricting, you have heard people use these terms. What they really refer to, and they really come out of voting rights compliance, what they refer to is that if you're dividing up a politically viable population concentration, so basically a group of people that is large enough to constitute a majority in a district, if you're dividing them up purposefully so it does not constitute a majority in any of the districts, then you're cracking. If you're packing people, too many people into one district, so essentially you have a population group that could potentially be a majority in two districts, but what you're doing is you're packing them all into one, then you're packing. So that's the cracking and packing, and it really does come out of voting rights, and I've heard people use these terms for all kinds of other things, so just wanted to let you know at least what the history of it is. So here we go. And here's a little graphic for you, and I have to thank, my colleague Stephen Ochoa for these, who's used these in the past. So what you see is, the gray circles and the white circles here, and then you see some random lines that were drawn. And I would invite you to take a look at this later and try to figure out how many districts you can actually draw where the gray people are a majority of the district but are not packed. So what you see on the left here is a cracking of the gray bubbles, because if you're counting up the bubbles in all these districts, you see that the white bubbles have the majority in every single district, so that the gray bubbles are never going to win. If the gray bubbles are all voting the same and the white bubbles are all voting differently, then the gray bubbles are never going to elect somebody who will represent them. They will never have an opportunity to elect a candidate of choice in Voting Rights Act language. On the right side of this, you see the opposite. This is a packing example where a very creative line drawer has basically taken all of our gray bubbles and stuck them all into one district so that they are electing one person out of the district, but not in any of the other districts. So if you're doing a good job, and I think anybody can do a better job than this, you can probably construct some districts where the gray bubbles will be able to elect candidates of choice in more than one district. So that is basically cracking and packing right here, and the Federal Voting Rights Act, Section 2 explained this part, at least, the line drawing piece. So race and districting, now we've talked about, our protected populations, we've talked a little bit about race and language minorities, and then we had the Supreme Court come in and said, well, people, race cannot be a predominant criterion in line drawing. So what does that mean? When that came down, we were all sitting there and going, what do you mean? It cannot be a predominant criterion in line drawing. Federal voting rights compliance is our second criterion, right? And it seems like you should be able to look at race and ethnicity and language minority status and, draw a good district, right? But what basically is happening is that you need to look at all of the criteria together in conjunction with voting rights compliance. And you have to be careful that you're not just looking at race when you're drawing a district. So race should not subjugate traditional districting principles, and those include compactness, contiguity, and communities of interest. And you'll remember from the first slide where I went through the different criteria that those are the criteria that we have to take into consideration for California Voting Rights Act compliance. District appearance has been important in some cases, and that is where my comment about what you can see under a microscope in your chemistry class comes in, because some of the most famous, or infamous, I should say, districts that the Supreme Court essentially used to come to this whole conclusion about limiting race and ethnicity, they had some very, very funky looking districts. I mean, there were things that were following a freeway, for hundreds of miles and whatnot. And of course, people that like maps, they love looking at these and figure out what they look like, and figure out this one looks like an elephant and this one looks like a unicorn and whatnot. So no elephants and no unicorns, please. At least not in the maps. So criterion 3, this is pretty straightforward. Contiguity, what is it? It's a district in which all parts are adjacent to another part. So in other words, a district in which you can travel from any one location to any other location without crossing the district boundary. So you want your district to be in one piece. You don't want part of District 1 in the south, then all the other districts in between, and then the other part of District 1 in the north. That just will not work. That is not a contiguous district. California law is very specific about how contiguity is defined. And what we say is areas that are separated by water and not connected by a bridge or a tunnel or regular ferry service are not contiguous. And I don't think we have ferries here in Hayward, so maybe that is not applicable here. But always good to know. And California law also specifies that areas that meet only at the points of the adjoining corners are not contiguous. So again, it also goes into, what does your district look like? Let's make sure those districts make sense, They're good-looking districts. We can do this. So criterion 4, my favorite criterion by far, communities of interest. Council districts shall respect neighborhoods and communities of interest. I've done a lot of research, actually since '97 or so, dating myself here, on communities of interest. And from my experience, oftentimes neighborhoods define themselves as communities of interest. But California law just wanted to make sure that we're very inclusive, so we spell out neighborhoods and communities of interest. Shall be respected as much as practicable. Communities of interest generally refers to a contiguous, again, population, here's that word again, contiguous in one piece, population which shares common social and economic interests. And, mainly like when we're drawing districts in the state or so, we get testimony about communities of interest, say people that are working together and they are a community of interest, but they're all over the state. And they're not in one piece, right? And you may have something like that here in Hayward also, where you have people work on a particular topic and they feel like they are a community, and they are. But for districting purposes, what we need is geography to be attached to your community. So we need something that we can put into a district together, if at all possible. So think of communities of interest as puzzle pieces that you'll tell us about, that we can use to build districts with. That's the way I kind of like to think about it. And communities of interest, for the most part, are much smaller than a district. So remember, our district size is 27,000 something persons. And, some communities of interest, they are maybe 400 or 500 persons. Sometimes it's a few thousand. Sometimes it's bigger. If it's bigger, then just remember we can't keep it in one district, because our first criterion is equal population. So we have some wiggle room, plus minus 5%, but if it's much larger, then we're not going to be able to keep it together. And again, this is the 4th criterion, so there's other criteria that are higher ranked. So everything just has to be weighed against each other, and we have to follow the law. There are no data sets really available to define communities of interest. We've already heard through a public comment that was sent to us that there is neighborhoods here in the city of Hayward that we can look at. We can probably look at some neighborhood boundaries if the council suggests that that's a good thing to look at. But for communities of interest, there are no data sets. So this is something where the community really can weigh in. And it's really important to hear from everybody, because that is how good districts are built. The law does not limit the kinds of interests that may bind a community, so there's nobody who will tell you that this is just not a community of interest, so please just try us. It's up to you to define it. It's up to people that live or work with communities. Oftentimes we have people that are, like advocacy groups or so, that are very active in a particular community, that are providing information about communities. And interests don't have to be limited to the current situation, like what's going on the ground right now. It can also be things that everybody's working on. Are you working on a playground together? Are you working on getting a particular area historic status? There's so many things that everybody in the community is working on. We all know this. We're all very active in California, so the sky's the limit, and we'd love to hear from all of you. Communities, again, they vary in size. Usually they're much smaller than districts, but you never know. Every jurisdiction is different. And the city will really need your input to define communities of interest. So here are some examples. Again, there is the broad categories of economic interests and social interests, and this is really just to get everybody to start wrapping their heads around it. Economic interests, the current situation could be common employment, economic opportunities, or maybe lack of economic opportunities. Goals could be expanding the opportunities that are there. Development, for example, bringing in businesses, jobs, and so forth. Social interests, again, the sky's the limit, could be schools, culture, transportation, parks. Improving recreational opportunities or public safety, preserving historic resources. And again, neighborhoods are often thought of as communities of interest. Some cities have very defined neighborhoods, and people think of those neighborhoods as their neighborhoods. Sometimes there are sub-neighborhoods in the defined neighborhoods. So we just want to hear from you, please, on these issues. So how do you document your community of interest? Think about the following questions. What bonds your community? So just outline what defines your community of interest. Or like, what's your mission or commonality? What do you all have in common? You can think about what's different outside of the boundaries of your community of interest as opposed to inside your community of interest. I mean, based on where I live, I know that there are certain streets where things just really change. The second you go across that street, it's a different community, and everybody knows it. And, my neighbors know it, I know it, and so for us, it's pretty straightforward. We know where our community of interest is. I don't want to say that it's easy to wrap your head around this concept, because we don't usually think about our communities as communities of interest. So really, these questions are just to kind of get you started. And, just a talking point when you're talking to your neighbors. So what we really do need to know is, aside from what defines you as a community, is where is your community located in the city? Again, as I said, the puzzle pieces, right? In the end, we are drawing geographic districts. So it's great to let us know what your community is about, but it doesn't help us if we don't know where your community is located. So let us please know where your community is located, and the way you do that is you say, this street, that street, this street, that street, for example. And there's different ways to get this information to us. You can create a map of the boundaries. You can use Google Maps, you can use a mapping program, you can use paper. We have a paper form that's on the website that you can just fill out. I have received maps on napkins. If you send a map on a napkin, please write clearly and make sure we can read the boundaries, and we prefer paper. You can get information on how to use the state's community of interest tool to map your communities of interest and submit them to the city by going to the website. So there's all this information. So this paper form is there. There is a little COI tool that you can use. There is an Excel tool that you can use, whatever you feel comfortable with. You can print out the community of interest form. You can give them to your neighbors. You can use the tool that's on the State of California's redistricting website. It's been used by thousands and thousands of people. It's very straightforward. It just asks you a few questions. You can draw your own map. You can send it off to your email and then submit it, or share it with your neighbors. You can get it in a PDF, so you can show your neighbors what you did, or your community members, or just bring it here, or you can send it in as a GIS file. So please try it out and let us know how it works for you. Criterion 5 is compactness, and just to remind everybody, again, this is the 5th ranked criterion, so we go in order of importance, really, but also really they all work in, they all work together a little bit. So it addresses the geography of the district. There is a lot of different ways to measure compactness. I like to say that it's a statistician's dream, especially before redistricting. There's literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different ways to measure them. And then, it becomes a little bit of a competition amongst all the statisticians about who has the best measure to measure compactness. And then it gets to the court, and the court said, well, we just want to know what it looks like. And then they look at the map, and they're like, oh, okay, looks okay. They use the eyeball approach. So one of the previous Supreme Court justices used to say, appearances do matter. So the components of a districting are outlined by California law. So there's the website, there's the 4 hearings, there's then the draft plan development, there's posting requirements, there's public access, which you already heard about a little bit from our colleagues at Trepepi Smith, and then there's public input. And again, there's the required hearings. 2 hearings must precede the draft map development. Hearing 1, I'm here providing an overview of the process and the criteria. Hopefully we'll get a little bit of input already today. But if you're not quite ready, you can reach us via the districting email, and there's a phone number and so forth. Yeah, just look at the website. It's pretty straightforward on how to get a hold of us and how to send comments in. And you can also drop off comments here at City Hall. The second hearing, at the second hearing, the council will begin to give some direction for draft maps and collect more communities of interest. And after the second hearing, we'll start working on some map options, so it'll be pretty exciting. At the third hearing, there will be some visualizations, so basically just the draft maps to just see what we came up with based on all of the comments that we've heard and the directions we received. We receive feedback, requests for changes to the visualizations, and then again, we work on various map options, and the drafts are posted for comment. And the hearing 4, we get feedback on the draft maps. We can make some live adjustments during the hearing, finalize the maps, and then at the 5th hearing, the City Council can approve the new districts, and so that's pretty much it. We currently have 2 hearings scheduled, today's, and then we have another one on the 28th. And why should you participate? I think you're here, you already know, and I hope many people are listening online. You should participate to make sure that we know about your community of interest, because if we don't know about your community of interest, we may inadvertently split your community of interest, even if we could keep it together. And it's not to say that we can keep all communities of interest together, because again, that's criterion 4, so there's 3 above it, but we'll do our best. You should participate to give your community a voice and make sure it has equal access to the political process, to encourage citizens to register, vote, and remain politically engaged, and to help shape a districting plan that will provide your community a meaningful opportunity to elect candidate of choice, candidates who represent their interests, your interests on issues that are important to your lives. So this is something that the Trepepi Smith people have already spoken about. How do you participate? Please just testify, let us know what you need, submit written testimony, send supporting information to the city, and just do it as quickly as you can. And please submit information at a hearing by mail, drop it off. And we have the address here, which is City of Hayward, 4th floor at the city clerk's office. And districting at hayward-ca.gov is your email to reach us. Phone number is 510-583-4444. And information online is on our website, maphayward.org. The tools are all available on the website. There is an online public redistricting tool also, so it's not just a tool to develop your communities of interest and send those over. You can also draw a full map. So for those of you, especially those of you who have sleepless nights, go ahead. This is your opportunity to keep busy at night and draw a map. Let us know if you need help. There's a help email that is linked to that web tool. And again, paper districting kits are available, Excel districting kit is available, community of interest form, and other things. So thank you so very much for participating. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Okay, so let me get back into what I need to do here. Okay, I do have some public comment cards. This is a public hearing, so what I want to do is I'll first go to public comments, and I'll return back up here to the dais. And there are some public speakers who have some announcements to make. First public speaker is Lilia Corral. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Lilia. I am a bilingual employee with the City Clerk's Office. I will be making an announcement in Spanish. Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Lilia. Soy una empleada bilingüe en la oficina de la secretaria municipal. Si usted necesita documentos traducidos a español o interpretación en futuras reuniones, llame a la oficina de la secretaria municipal al 510-583-4400 o envíenos un correo electrónico a cityclerk@hayward-ca.gov. Gracias.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Tracy Nunez.
Hi, my name is Tracy Nguyen. I'm an employee here with City of Hayward. I'm going to make a statement in Vietnamese. Xin chào buổi tối. Nếu quý vị cần tài liệu dịch sang tiếng Việt hoặc cần thông dịch tại các buổi họp trong tương lai, xin vui lòng gọi cho văn phòng thư ký theo số phone 510-583-4400 hoặc gửi email cho chúng tôi tại địa chỉ cityclerk@hayward.ca.gov. Cảm ơn.
Ms. Nguyen, thank you, and I apologize for mispronouncing your name. Next speaker is Lenny, is it Damaso? Yes. Yeah.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lenny Esraita Damaso. I'm a Hayward Police Department employee. I would like to make an announcement in Tagalog language, which is the first language in the Philippines. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Kung kakailangan ninyo po ng dokumento sa wikang Tagalog o sa susunod pang mga panindigan, maaari pong tawagan ang opisina ng City Clerk. Ang numero po ay 510-583-4400 or mag-email lang po kayo sa cityclerk@hayward-ca.gov. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. Our next public speaker is Flora Chin.
Good evening. My name is Flora Chen, City of Hayward employee. I'm going to make announcement in Chinese. 晚上好。如果你需要中文翻译文件，或将来的听证会需要翻译，请联系城市书记办公室，联系电话510-583-4400，电子邮箱地址 cityclerk@hayward-ca.gov。谢谢。
谢谢. Thank you. Our next speaker is Scott Rafferty.
Good evening. So I have been working with the Asian American community and moving this process forward, and suddenly it's moving quite quickly. So I'm trying to accommodate that, and I'm kind of caught out because I usually like to show up at this hearing with a great big PowerPoint and talk through some of the philosophies of what we're trying to do, because I know there are a lot of concerns, but also to just have some graphics about your community. Everybody knows their neighborhood, and that's a very important type of community of interest. And the only really authentic information you can get is from your own constituents. But it's also important to look at other things, and not just race or ethnicity. Well, that's an important factor because everybody needs to be represented, and needs to have an equal opportunity to choose their representatives, who are not always their own race. But also to look at socioeconomic factors that may not be apparent. How many children there are. There's some areas that have a lot of children. There are areas where people may not have access to cars. There are crowded housing. I tend to emphasize looking at things that make it more difficult for people to really have an impact on local public policy, their educational status, and looking and trying to give those people a voice, and trying to separate them from areas that have the opposite, that have a lot of resources, and not blend them. So that's an important philosophy. Sometimes it correlates highly with race. Other times it points in different directions. You can make a super high Latino district if that's all you think about. But if it includes a really well-established community and excludes an immigrant community just based on racial numbers, then you're not really accomplishing what you want to do. And ultimately, it's not about who winds up sitting on the dais, but it's about having a deeper relationship with constituents, having somebody that knows your neighborhood and really represents your neighborhood. And people say, oh, that'll be divisive. But California's unusual. The rest of the country has been doing this for a long time. And what people learn is that you don't reelect people who aren't really good negotiators. And when you're dealing with somebody who answers to a constituency, can be recalled by that constituency, you're not reelected, you listen to them, even if you don't agree with them on most things. And that's kind of been the genius of American democracy. And you are one of the largest cities.
Mr. Rafferty, thank you. Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck Purvis.
See if I can get it. Hi, I'm Chuck Purvis. I'm a resident of downtown Hayward. I have a graphic I'd like to, to share.
Yeah, just put it down and then
Put it down, yeah.
the magical technology.
And somebody comes
technologists come out. There you go. See, there you go.
And it's going to appear somewhere, right?
Yeah, it'll.
This is a wonderful graphic from Jean Bertolina. She based this off of the 16 neighborhoods that the city officially has. And she added the downtown neighborhood and then Eden Shores. So there's 18 of these neighborhoods. This is a wonderful, wonderful graphic. I'm probably violating copyright law by showing this, but I think this is a very good starting point for either the neighborhoods or the communities concerned in the city, in the districting process. So I've already looked at the mapping, Map Hayward. You have census tracts and block groups. I think remove those, maybe start with these neighborhoods, and then go and let people try to build and adjust from this starting point. That's a recommendation. The concern or comment is that you're looking at several different variables too. Total population, voting age population, and citizen voting age population, which the last one is a little cringeworthy because the census, the decennial census does not collect citizenship data, and that's essentially brought in from the American Community Survey, where they did a special project for the U.S. Department of Justice, or so I understand. So I think the recommendation to the council is let's focus on total population, and there are some of these other variables that will kind of befuddle or cloud up your judgments in terms of how to draw these districts. Essentially, the decennial census does include total population and then voting age population by race, ethnicity. So that's the best we have for these processes. A question I have is, are multiple submissions of maps doable? For example, I may see an excellent submission by somebody else, and I say, I want to do some small adjustments to that. So keep that in mind. Is there a way to essentially build off of somebody else's submission to fine-tune it, so to speak? That's it. I'm also a retired urban transportation planner, and I have kind of a few decades of experience using census data. So if there's anything the council or the planning department needs, just give me a call.
Thank you. Paul Taylor, next speaker.
Mayor Salinas and the esteemed council. Well, I'm not here to talk about census tract or how the districts will align themselves, or I guess after court decides basically if they're going to approve a specific map of districts. I'm not here to talk about that. That's going to take care of itself. I'm here representing the people and the membership. I am the executive director of the Rental Housing Association of Southern Alameda County. I'm also a board member of the Hayward Chamber of Commerce. So when we first looked at what was transpiring here, and we said, well, when are they going to be able to do this? Excuse my language, but there's no way in hell that they can get this done in 24, because you talk about having to go ahead and rush everything through and not do it the way it should be done. It's not possible. So some of my members who are not here echo the same sentiment. They're like, why can't we just move this back to 26? And I said, that would make sense, wouldn't it? I'm the kind of guy that says, if you tell me 2 and 2 is 4, I just leave you alone. But if you tell me 2 and 2 is 5, I got to ask you questions. And so what it seems like is happening here, trying to rush this, to get this done, you would be eliminating a large swath of the population because they don't understand it. By the time the legal process gets through, maybe the map that you've come up with for districts, maybe it doesn't work. But here's the reality. The people are going to be confused. They're not going to know what district they're in. I don't care how many different, I guess you could say, flyers you send out, you're doing an injustice to the population. So my recommendation personally, but for the membership of the Rental Housing Association, is take your time, get it right. Let's go ahead and start this process in 2026. With that, I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Todd Fadaldi, or Faduti. Apologies.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I'm here representing the Hayward Chamber of Commerce as the chairman of the board. After seeing the process and the impacts involved in transitioning this city's electoral system from an at-large election to district elections, the Hayward Chamber of Commerce believes it is necessary to delay the transition to the 2026 election rather than targeting November 2024. Rushing into such a fundamental change to our electoral process risks moving or creating more problems than it solves in the short term. Transitioning our elections requires an enormous amount of analysis, public input, demographic studies, and logistical preparations. Attempting to fast-track district mapping, precincting, voter education efforts, and all the other critical elements for the 2024 election cycle raises the high likelihood of costly errors, confused voters, depressed voter turnout, and divisiveness in a city where our current elected officials and community supporters diligently work to educate and increase inclusivity. A shift of this magnitude should not be taken hastily or carelessly. By extending the timeline to 2026, our city staff, elected officials, and community stakeholders will have the necessary time to meet with business members, thoroughly examine all data, solicit substantive public feedback, navigate required regulatory approvals, and put forward a fair, equitable district model that provides public confidence. This transition is too critical to our democratic process to risk mismanaging it for Mr. Rafferty and for expedience sake. We have confidence that you will provide the well-being of our community, or prioritize the well-being of our community, and oversee the districting process with the diligence and respect it warrants, and not let the unethical, opportunistic, personal gain of an individual to take precedence over the best interests of our city. The Chamber believes a 2026 target date keeps this initiative on track while providing the time necessary to properly implement this change in our local elections. We owe it to all of our city's residents and businesses to do the right thing rather than rush. Our advocacy is for an open, transparent, and collaborative district process over the next 2 years in order to uphold the integrity of our elections for decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And before you move on, I believe the interim city manager, Clausen, has a comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone who's come and speaking this evening. I wanted to, I know we don't respond generally to public comment, but I do want to assure folks that we are talking about the going to district-based elections in not for the 2024 election, but for the 2026 election. So I just wanted to make that clarification for folks. I know that has only become clear to us in the last week or so, so I wanted to make sure that the community had that information.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Rich Fierro.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. So I'm Rich Fierro, resident of Jackson Triangle, and I came here to speak in opposition to this whole thing in general. I understand that the city is basically being extorted into doing this, and there's no other option other than to do it. However, as a 35-year resident of Hayward, I just want to say in general, when I look at this council, which I've been here before to both praise and criticize, I see a lot of diversity. The 35 years that I've seen you all make decisions and your predecessors, the one conversation that's never come up is district. Where is this located? What are we doing? We can look at the Matt Jimenez Center in Tennyson, the new library right here in downtown, the Navigation Center. Never was it a conversation about this neighborhood or that neighborhood. It was a conversation about Hayward. That's what I've always appreciated. Our council has been criticized many times for maybe deliberating a little too long, but I've always felt it was good government to get everybody's input. You know, I think the stated premise is to make it easier for a certain demographic to be elected. That seems anti-democratic to me. So I just in general want to state my opposition again. I will be participating in this to obviously help as much as possible, but in general, this is a bad day for Hayward and it's very disappointing. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carla, or Commissioner Carla Goodbody.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Salinas, members of the council, and residents here in the chamber and participating on Zoom. I'm Carla Goodbody, and I'm here proudly representing my neighborhood of Southgate, where I've lived for 15 years, raised my daughters, and home to the Southgate Swim Club and Southgate Penguins. Go Penguins. The Southgate community is bordered by Hesperian Boulevard to the west, Southland Mall to the north, 880 to the east, and Tennyson Avenue to the south. Southgate straddles Highway 92, and so there's both a lower Southgate and an upper Southgate. And I hope throughout this process that the demographers and the council maintain our community together despite the division with the Highway 92. In response to the question about what bounds Southgate as a community, I would offer a two-part response. First is economic and educational, and economic would be our proximity to Southland Mall, Chabot College, St. Rose Hospital. We are proud to have a variety of housing in Southgate. We have single-family homes, duplexes, and condos. Our students attend Southgate Elementary, Leadership Academy, King Middle School, Ochoa Middle School, and Mount Eden High School. One of the things I appreciate about my community is that we're a very engaged community. We have a very high voter participation rate, and we have two hard facilities. We are a dog-loving, pet-loving community, so there are a bunch of us that use those facilities and have built strong bonds because of those facilities. So thank you for your hard work with HARD. The second is social. We have two churches, and of course we have the swim team and the swim club that I would also add have very involved in youth economic development. I also wanted to add the Eden ROP. So I see a nexus, a synthesis there in which, in my own experience with my daughters, their first job was with this swim club. They were hired as lifeguards. They got their Red Cross certification there, and it's just a really a continuity that I would like to continue. And many of our youth are employed at Southland Mall. Many of our young folks are educated at Chabot College, perhaps enrolled in Professor Sormeño's classes. And so my ask is to keep our community together to the extent possible so that we can continue growing as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a comment online, public commenter online. Dave R.
Hello. Yeah, this is Dave Robinson is my full name. At last month's city council meeting, Scott Rafferty and Jack Wu, the plaintiff, insisted that that the remedy that be put in place would be put in place by November 2024. The purpose of that was to have city council elections aligned with the high turnout November 24 election. We could have that if the plaintiffs were to seek a hopefully friendly court order to adopt proportional ranked choice voting, which Albany started in 2022. And I've been corresponding with my friend Preston Jordan, who is serving on the city council there. Proportional ranked choice voting allows voters to group themselves, essentially to district themselves without having line drawers telling them who they can or cannot vote for. If you have a group that has 31% of the vote, which Mr. Rafferty is representing the Associated Protective Group, they'd get a proportional number of votes, which would be 2 seats on the council, assuming that they vote cohesively for a candidate of their choice. You can't crack or pack a proportional ranked choice voting system, and it retains the one Hayward concept that one of the previous commenters talked about. I appreciate the initial efforts of the city and its consultants, but I do ask the city and the plaintiffs to diligently consider this easier and more effective voting rights remedy. On the other hand, if the city wants to move to districts, I think one complication that I'd like to understand more is that the Hayward City Charter specifies that the mayor is a member of the city council, and that is a member of the city council is elected at large. In the presentation we saw earlier, we talked about having the city divided into 6 districts, but I'm not so sure that it should be that way. It should maybe, in fact, be 7, because the safe harbor provision in the Voting Rights Act, California Voting Rights Act, requires that the whole city council be moved to districts. So I'd like to ask the city to try to clarify that and address whether this change can be made with or without a charter amendment. And perhaps a charter amendment would have to revise the role of the mayor in part of this district scheme. So thank you for considering my comments, and I'll yield my time. Thanks, bye.
Thank you. Next, I have TJ from Hayward Concerned Citizens.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I am TJ, speaking on behalf of Hayward Concerned Citizens. HCC is a community. We have diversity. Our members are in the hills. We have members in the flats, in all directions. I did get to watch the HUSD public hearing about the districting. I think it is an overwhelming process for people who don't fully understand. I'm glad to hear that this is being put off till 2026. I think we do have to have a lot of sensitivity for our residents as far as just, knowing how the districts are divided. I can tell you from being on the ground on Nextdoor, my favorite platform, that there are a lot of people who are really out of touch, not aware. And I know we're going to say, why didn't anybody say this? Why didn't anybody allow us to have a say? So I think that our group is, of course, going to continue to advocate, even though our little community may be divided in districts now. We will continue to advocate for all residents of Hayward to be able to have a voice. We will continue to educate the community, give them information, as we have always done. And I would ask that I think it would be helpful to have some type of town halls as this gets closer, similar to the town hall to you. I thought that was really helpful for the city to be coming to these different areas in the community and to have, a face-to-face discussion with the residents interested in knowing more about this. I think the presentation was great, but I think more of this will be really helpful. The outreach is going to be key here. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I don't see any more public comments online, and I don't have any more cards. I was just informed by the city clerk that apparently Mr. Rafferty has, I guess, an additional 12 minutes after all the public comments. Yes? Mr. Rafferty, 12 minutes.
Can I ask why? Well, thank you. I do appreciate the opportunity to address.
Mr. Rafferty, can you hold up 1 second? Can we put 12 minutes on the clock? Okay, hit the button so it's red, and then all right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So thank you. I do appreciate the opportunity to address some of the concerns of the community, and I didn't have enough time in 3 minutes to say everything that needs to be said. I want to start off, by the way, by congratulating you on Karen McDonald. She has a very unique skill in being able to do these real-time simulations, and if you have the opportunity, I think one of the most successful hearings I've ever been to, it was really a workshop, and I've been to a lot, and I try to go to them all, was in Antioch, and the mayor there really didn't like the idea, but he was, he was listening to his constituents. There was coffee, there was donuts. People were really getting along with the process, and I went up to him and I said, I learned a lot about your city today. And he looked at me kind of shocked, and he said, I learned a lot about my city today. And so I hope you can, especially with having Karen, because it was really unique, I hope you can capture that spirit of really learning about your city and the different needs people have, and who feels well represented and who feels they need to be represented. And that's another brilliant example. Half the council was, there was the mayor and there were 2 black council members who both supported districts, and they were neighbors. One of them became mayor, fortunately. But everyone was agreed that the top quarter of the city above the interstate hadn't had representation on the council for 35 years. And that was a problem everyone wanted to address. And it made the council more representative. The mayor certainly got the message. And but people really learned a lot about the community that they hadn't known. So that's the positive here. That's the opportunity. Now, in terms of some of the things that were said seem to indicate there hasn't been a lot of information about this process, and the suggestion that we move towards this process in the presidential year was made quite some time ago. And so I don't want to go into too much detail, but you're hearing the community wants some transparency, and this is not coming out of nowhere. And the reason it's so important is that last February, the new census data shows that if you divide the city 7 ways, there's a majority Asian district. And that has enormous legal significance. And there are opportunities to work around that and do something right. But that area of the city is not currently represented, hasn't been for a long time, although they are close to members of Zemeno. And so there has been a focus on dealing with that community and trying to get them a voice, because the presidential year is so much better than starting in 26. In 26, the minority turnout is very low, traditionally, not in 2018 for unusual reasons, but generally, it's not a good way to start. You're really putting that community that needs representation the most and hasn't really had an equal shot off 4 years, and that's not a good thing. So I've been trying to work to find creative solutions for that, and I think we should all keep that as a priority. In general, I'm going to come down in the middle on this because this is very rushed, and that's not my choice. Maybe we should talk more about that. But on the other hand, it could have some benefits knowing where the district's going to be before you vote in 2024. It's going to be a painful process for some of the incumbents just because you are concentrated, and I don't take any delight in that. That's a challenge, and you can't think about it. You have to do what's right for the people. The people have to choose the voters, not the incumbents choose the constituents. So I'm very sympathetic to that, and I think as a community you can work through that. But it can't drag on for 2 years. It can't happen in the middle of the summer, and you need to find ways to get real input, more speakers. Food helps, and if it's Saturday morning and it's good for people, coffee and donuts, if you have tacos someplace and maybe a little less formality, I think you'll really find some good things about your community, some valuable insights. And, an overlay on this is doing right by the Asian American community in the west part of the city, and doing so, that doesn't mean that race is the predominant variable, but it's important to recognize how unique California is. And to those people who say, "Oh, we should never ever talk about race," just a thumbnail history here. This whole system of at-large is not the way things worked in this country until about 1900. If you go back, when the Germans landed in New York City in 1680, they were told they had to elect a council person. And that's the way our country was working from colonial times until we had the whole Jim Crow era in the early 1900s. And it wasn't about black people in California. And it wasn't about Mexicans, because there weren't very many. It was about Asians and Irish and Italians. And this at-large system was created for them. And it spread around the country until 1965, when everybody else got rid of it. and it's been very resistant in California. And in my county, where we went very quickly from having almost no districts to having every sizable city or school district with a minority population having districts in about a 4-year period, the effects have been very dramatic. There are more minority successes, yes, in getting elected, more young people, because people were really entrenched in these huge areas where there weren't competitive elections. But the most important thing is there's been dramatic increases in Latino turnout and in Asian turnout. And that is what this is actually all about. These are large areas in any city, and I'm afraid it's the Democratic Party, which I happen to be a member, and candidates neglect big parts of urban California because there just aren't enough votes there. You know, the at-large system is about getting to 51%, and you focus on the people that are most likely to vote. And that's what changes with districting. And that's why these socioeconomic variables tell you something. I mean, there was a school district in my county where one big city had 4 children for every voter, and another city had 3 voters for every child. And that kind of imbalance, the areas where people vote the least and have the least influence often have the most needs. So when you district, all of a sudden, 1/5 of the city that has 1/10 of the voters has 1/5 of the influence. And as I said, it's not divisive. It's, you know, you have a voice, and you have the opportunity to negotiate with colleagues who have a different job. Why on earth would you give 7 people the exact same job when that job is to be right for everyone on every issue all the time? That's the change. And it's a powerful change. It's a beneficial change. It's going to make your council stronger, more knowledgeable, and more accountable. So this is, I hope, a collaborative endeavor. It should have happened in 2024. There were opportunities. I'm not going to say too much more, but you need to do it right and with some real effort to appreciate the benefits and the fact that you are on the verge of becoming the very largest city in our state to be at large. So this is not normal. And it's not a ridiculous request to ask you to change. I know everybody has to be happy with the system that elected them or appointed them, but look beyond that and look to a legacy and try to embrace something that has worked well in most of the country and most of the state, and made just, it's not about diversity of outcomes. It's about equality of influence and bringing democracy closer to all people. So I hope that's a measure of my sincerity and my client's sincerity and the balance that we have to strike, because, look, Asians have not had much influence or much electoral success in this city, not just the city council. And to change that, districting is not going to be an overnight cure, but it's going to improve things. And we don't have to focus on, pulling out the evidence of racially polarized voting, but I've done it. It's there, and it's not a bad thing. Asians vote differently. They have different values. So do Latinos. So do blacks. But the difference is white people and black people vote at high rates, at almost equal rates. And Asians and Latinos do not. And 45 years ago, the author of the Voting Rights Act told me that I was an idiot and that I knew nothing about California because I said, the 65 Act is working so great, we should just extend it to Latinos, which we did. He said, nothing's going to change until you get rid of at-large in California. And he was right. and it has changed, and it will change. It will improve Hayward. So thank you for your time, and I hope we can work together. Thank you.
Okay.
Eventually, we'll get my letterhead. I'm very available to your community, and if Karen doesn't do it, I'll defer to her, but we'll have a mapping website if necessary, and I just want to be as approachable and transparent as possible. So thank you.
So I'm going to close public comment, and before I come to the dais, I'm going to open up. No, wait, I just did public comment. Come back to the dais. Okay, yeah, that's right. All right, and then first speaker is Councilmember Zerminio.
Mayor, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the report. It's excellent. Thank you to the public comments by all of you. Let's see. So I do have a couple comments and questions. We're probably going to receive 100 maps. So who will make the final decision? I can't see us looking over 100 maps. So I imagine that somebody will look at all those lines and come up with 1, 2, or 3 options. Can you clarify a little bit for me that?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. So we will probably receive some maps and, communities of interest and so forth, and we will ask you for your direction. We will let you know what has been submitted. We'll synthesize the information and show you what's there, and then we will be constructing some options for you and, just let you know what the pros and cons are based on your direction and on public comment. So we'll work that through for you.
Okay. So now I have a comment and then another question. I love the plurality of languages, Madam City Clerk. That's excellent. Thank you very much. I wasn't pleased with some of the comments from the last speaker who made some ethnic generalizations, but that's the way it goes. So my next question is, so we will probably vote on this. Most likely it will be approved in order to satisfy the demands of a certain ethnic group that feels that they're not represented up here. What would happen if all of a sudden, after we decide on this, the Ohlone community decided, hey, we're not represented here? And the question is, can they sue us? As we've been sued right now.
So,
because they feel they're not being represented. Right? And we have an Ohlone community in Hayward.
yeah, so thank you very much for actually pointing out that there is a Ohlone community, and I would say we should do a lot of outreach to the Ohlone community and bring them in at the front end so that they can participate. And just participate in this process and give us information about where their members are. I just finished a different project with that involved a tribal area, and it was very interesting. And I know a tiny little bit about California tribal lands and so forth. And I think it would be great to do some targeted outreach to make sure that we know where the membership is, for example, because there's not always perfect information available. And it's California, and you can pretty much anybody can sue anybody for anything, as far as I have learned. And I am not an attorney; I'm a political scientist. But I think you're doing right now what you need to do under the California Voting Rights Act. So I think we're okay at the moment.
So my question is,
yeah,
can the Ohlone community sue us for not being able to represent them, for not allowing them equal representation on this body, just as it's happening right now?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll go in a little bit more detail. So generally speaking, so Federal Voting Rights Act. Under the Federal Voting Rights Act, if you need basically to draw or to the necessity to draw a district under the Federal Voting Rights Act depends on various factors. One is the community group has to be sufficiently large and compact and contiguous enough to constitute a majority in the district.
Oh, they will have to prove that they are.
You have
okay.
to look at that first.
All right.
So, and that's probably where that's the first prong.
So
pretty
that
much of-
particular group
of
probably
gene
would
growth.
not be able to
If
sue
it's a
us.
smaller group, correct. That doesn't mean, though, that the community may not want to stay together, right?
Right. Okay.
So it's also a question of whether the community is actually contiguous, so basically
Okay.
just lives
All right.
close by. And, like on a state context,
All right.
sometimes you see that with, tribal lands, reservations, and so
Okay.
forth. But oftentimes, people are more dispersed in the more local areas.
And that would also apply to our Nigerian community, our Ukrainian community?
Yes,
Okay,
and,
all right.
and remember, under the Voting Rights Act, right, remember, it's language minority and it's race, right? It's race and language minority. So first we look at, are you protected, or are you one of the protected groups under the Federal Voting Rights
Well, the
Act?
Ohlone are protected as per your slide.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes. Mhm.
All right, okay. And then, Mr. City Manager, when do we foresee hearing 5? This is our first one. Any
We
possible?
only plan to have 4 hearings.
Hmm?
We only plan to have 4 hearings.
And the 5th one is where we make the final decision.
sure. So,
September, October,
this fall.
January?
No, I think this fall.
Oh, this fall?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And all this for the 26th elections?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, the fall's fine. I believe your presentation was very thorough. That's excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Syra.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. Really appreciated. Thank you to the folks who came out and gave public comment. And thank you, Mr. Purvis, for the maps. They're incredibly helpful. Just had a few questions here. I also want to acknowledge the folks that did write in. For those tuning in online, the council did receive a packet of the various responses we've received already through the districting email address that has been set up on our behalf. So one of the questions somebody asked online was, can we add the state and federal law that's applicable to districting to the website so residents can access that and read that?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. And then there was a question, I believe Chuck had mentioned, around submitting multiple maps or updating previously submitted maps. Could you speak to how that's weighed or that process?
Yeah, again, thank you for that question. I texted our outreach consultants, because they are in charge of the website, and asked whether they could accommodate some map files. Because what I'm thinking is, we need to kind of talk through the details of that, but we'll see how we can make that happen. And multiple maps, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
Great. And is there a process or rules around submitting maps on behalf of other people? So for example, I've had a few community organizations reach out and say, we want to support folks with the map making. The city isn't the only organization going through a districting process right now. And they wanted to know, can we help submit maps on behalf of other people, or do they have to submit it on their own? And if maps can be submitted by other people, are they deprioritized versus them being submitted by the individual themselves?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I am not aware of any restrictions on people submitting maps. Ultimately, you are the decision makers. So we'll walk you through it. You know where the map comes from, because people are going to say, hey, this is my map, or, worked with this particular organization. It's very common that there's organizations working with community members. I mean, really, when I was talking about sleepless nights, not everybody wants to learn a mapping program. We have one available. It's the easiest one to learn, but still you got to learn it, and most of us don't read the instructions on how to use our remote control. So let's just put that all into context, right? If you have somebody who comes out and says, hey, I'm going to help you draw a map, why not, right? And we'll accept it, and then you can weigh that accordingly.
Thank you for your answers, and I'm in agreement with a lot of the comments that were made tonight. We do want this process to be open and transparent for members of the community, so we're going to do our best to allow folks to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Roach.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask the same question for Mr. Purvis about the multiple submissions. It sounds like we're answering that. And then also the questions about town hall. Are we going to be going out to the community besides this format to, you know, on like a different date or a different setting to get community input?
I think that might be a question for our city manager.
Yeah, and we are certainly going out to other parts of we're planning to try to get out to as much of the community as possible, do as much outreach. Holding these meetings in other parts of the community may be difficult. Certainly extending the time may allow for some of that setup to be done, but trying to involve as much of the community as possible is what we're planning to do.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. And I do have a comment. I mean, I'm on board with this process. I think, you know, the original intent of the CVRA was a good thing. And I hope it does create more representation for our Asian community members. So I hope that output is right. And I like to see that people are already giving us input on their different communities of interest. I think that's all really great and really healthy. But I sort of can't let this moment go by after listening to Mr. Rafferty talk. You know, I think part of your comments are almost making this more divisive. You're looking at a council that's almost perfectly mirrors our demographics. And while I understand your comment that it's not about the current council, and I don't think any of us are taking that way, we understand we're a blip in time and that these districts will last beyond us. I think we all understand that. But you're also talking about 3 council members that are born and raised here. They are deep rooted in the community. They are our community. And so I just can't help this moment go by to say, I'm a little offended by you bringing your common talking points for the whole state into a city like Hayward. I think you've heard some of the community speak towards this, that, well, I'm on board. We're going to move forward with this. I think we're all working together to do that. But I think the community needs to hear that this is the statistic about us being the largest city in the state now that is still at large. That's just a standalone statistic because it doesn't necessarily look at the details of how we are represented here in Hayward. And again, we perfectly mirror the demographics of our city. And we're all people that have lived here a long time, very rooted in the community. And so to get the input that will understand the community more, we will understand people's interest in how they want to be clumped together for districts. I think that will be healthy. But to say that some of the people on this side know the district, and they're going to know the district, they know it so well that I just can't help but say that piece of it is making it more divisive for me. And I don't appreciate you coming into our house and telling us how we should understand our community more. And I just needed to get that on the record. And I apologize if I went rogue. Thank you, Mayor.
Appreciate your comments. Councilmember Bonilla.
Thank you, Mayor. I echo very much what Councilmember Roche has just said. As it relates to moving these meetings into the community, I know that the council has had meetings at the Matt Jimenez Center in the past. I would just really encourage us to see how we might be able to move it away from City Hall and into the community to make sure that we're holding true to our commitment of being authentic and getting the broadest set of input we can from our community. I appreciate everyone being here tonight and the comments that we heard. I think that they were great comments, and this also underscores the complexity of the situation that we're dealing with and how comprehensive this transition needs to be. But it seems like we have the right people working through this with us, our city attorney, our city clerk, and our outside partners, as well as our city manager. You know, I do agree that this must be a community-led and a community-driven process, and it needs to be thoughtful and well-informed, which is why I'm glad that this is not going to be implemented until 2026. It's going to give us the time to get the input that we need to make sure that the maps are representative and as representative as possible, and to make sure that we're moving forward in a way that aligns with our community and our values. So although, you know, I may not necessarily be the one that's the most supportive of this right now, I understand that we need to do it and why we need to do it, and I look forward to the community helping us drive a process that's fair, that's transparent, and that's representative. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentations from the presenter online as well as here today. I also want to thank the public commenters. I understand this transition may not be ideal for everyone, but we're doing this for the protection of our city and just we have to look at what the law states, both statewide and federal. I want to give special thank you to Mr. Farrell for his comments and his legacy in the city. I wanted to thank Planning Commissioner Goodbody for advocating for her community in Southgate. And I want to thank TJ from Hayward Concerned Citizens for bringing up the outreach with town halls in different parts of the community. I echo comments from Councilmember Bonilla regarding town halls at Matt Jimenez. I also would like us to consider Hayward Unified facilities. I know Mount Eden has a brand new shiny facility and they also are going through this, but obviously we want to consider staff as well and making sure that it is something that is feasible. I'm not gonna even respond to anyone that mentions the blacks in a comment, so we don't even need to talk to him about that. So I'm just gonna move forward. But also wanted to thank Councilmember Roche for her comments as well. And thank staff. I know there's a lot of hard work getting to this point. And I know there was a lot of feedback you were getting from different parts of the community, staff, all that, but we've come to this place and I think we have to move forward with 2026, so thank you.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that very thorough presentation. It was illuminating. In order to make this work well to its most ideal form, we need as much community engagement as possible. So kudos to those of you who've shown up for the meeting, those of you online who are participating, those who have filled out the online form, and please reach out to your neighbors and your friends around town to get them also to participate. It'll be really important. It's also really important from a transparency point of view. We want to make sure that everybody in the city that has an interest in seeing this work really fully understands where we stand with it. Yeah, we have some misgivings because for the last 20 years, everyone that's been up here on this dais or participating with the city has really made very, very strong effort to reach out to the community, to find people within this very diverse community who will represent that diversity and then mentor them. And this is really, honestly, this is such a brilliant council that I get to work with. I hold my colleagues in such very high esteem, but also the city staff that make this possible. And so that's where our misgiving is. We feel that our city has done a fantastic job in bringing representation forward. And it's a little scary to think that now things are going to change. And one of the scariest things is, for those of us that are on council, we're looking at the prospect of maybe having to move into a district if we want to run. And not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody has the luxury to do that. So going back to making this work, having communities of interest identify themselves and be part of this process will be key. And then the moving forward is identifying people within those districts who have an interest in serving and then mentoring them, because anyone can get elected, but not everyone is well suited for the job. So mentoring is, in my mind, the best way to develop talent who will do a great job representing everyone in the city and not neglect other communities because they're not familiar with them. So please reach out to your friends around the city and encourage them to participate in this. Thank you.
Thank you, and I believe Councilmember Zermeño had one more comment.
My apologies, Mayor, but I did have one last comment that was egged on by my colleague Roche, and I appreciate it. Ours is an exemplary city, fantastic, very diverse. The last public speaker does not know Hayward. I am the first Mexican-born immigrant elected at large by the city of Hayward. We have now the first Latino mayor elected at large in our city of Hayward. So the last speaker really does not know what he's talking about. So thank you again, and let's move forward for our city.
Thank you. And that is comments from my colleagues, and I appreciate it. And I've been an educator for many years, and particularly in this space for many years. And historically, if you look at the origins, the genesis of the federal Voting Rights Act passed by President Johnson, the origins of that act, the genesis came about because of gerrymandering, primarily in states where Jim Crow was thriving and had a lock on everyday life. Jim Crow did not only exist and did not have a tightening grip in the South, but Jim Crow also had an equally tightening grip throughout the Southwest, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and here in California. And the Voting Rights Act, as conceived by the Johnson administration, set out to stop that and to bring more representation for those communities who were under the tight grip of Jim Crow. And it worked. Here in California, historically, Latinos, Mexicans, Native Americans, Asians, African Americans have been fighting for representation on bodies, elected bodies. And there have been dubious electioneering done. And candidates of color have run. Candidates of color have earned positions on these bodies, elected bodies, locally, state, and national. And I think the California Voting Rights Act, the genesis started out good, started out with the vision that more candidates of color would set out to run for office, to represent their communities, and then more candidates of color would earn these positions and these seats. But what I don't think the Federal Voting Rights Act, or the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the California Voting Rights Act of 2001, I don't think Richard Polanco had in mind attorneys going up and down the state of California in a cottage industry and suing cities, making money to get cities to district. And I want to be very clear, we're going to do this, right? And I appreciate the speaker, sort of the context of why we have to do this. But I also want to be very clear, make no mistake, we're doing this because we have an attorney that has come to our city, sued us to do this. And he's making money. He's profiting from this process right here. And so that's why we are here. You know, I have to agree, and I'm glad Councilmember Roach sort of brought it up. You know, somebody who was born in this city, someone who was raised in this city, someone who has educated in this city, someone who has made a life in this city, and who has lived, not in every neighborhood, but has lived in South Hayward, North Hayward, the Hayward Hills, West Hayward. I've lived in at least 5 neighborhoods in this city in my 53 years living in Hayward. 5 neighborhoods. I know these neighborhoods, and I find it absolutely offensive when somebody comes into our house and tells me that I would learn more about my city going through this process. There are approximately 176 precincts in this city. 176. I've walked every single one of these precincts.
So did I.
Every single one of them. Every street, every door, every neighborhood. I can tell you the colors of doors in a particular street. I can tell you the trim of the house because I've walked these neighborhoods. And I can tell you this, the 7 of us sitting up here have done it too. And so to come here and say that we would grow from this process is absolutely offensive. You know, the California Voting Rights Act, I understand the presentation, and it was a great presentation. I understand the presentation that race cannot be the single significant factor in this process. But if you go back and review what Mr. Rafferty said, virtually every word, every reference to justify this process is Asian and West Hayward. I mean, every explanation that was given to us tonight, that was it. There's an example I want to end with. In Berkeley, there was a good council member. His name was Councilmember Rigel Robinson. He was a good guy. And he was on Berkeley City Council, and he resigned from his seat. And the circumstances were not good. And he resigned his seat. And I knew him. He's a good guy. Great councilman, strong councilman, competent council member. And so there was an election held in Berkeley, in his district, for a new council member to fill his seat. The winner of this seat won a seat on the Berkeley City Council with a population equivalent to ours. She won the seat with less than 400 votes. 400 votes. And there she is. So when we talk about participatory democracy, I mean, so what do? Do we just, whatever district we live in, we just go find 300 of our friends to vote for us? In a city of 160,000 people, where 42% of our city is a student from preschool to grad school, just get 300 people, right? So, I'm insulted, to be quite honest with you, and I'm offended, and I appreciate, you know, the creative map. I get it, you know, but we're gonna walk down this path. We're gonna do it. I'm glad we're doing it in 2026, but I just look forward to the day I read in the newspaper when Walnut Creek becomes districted. And with that, I don't have any further comments. So what do we do next?
That's the only item on the agenda this evening, so we are free to adjourn.
Okay, so with those concluding remarks, our next meeting is May 21st, 2024 at 7 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is adjourned.